The Green Mile is a film with an in-depth look at the penitentiary in the 1930s based in Cold Mountain, Louisiana during the Great Depression. While highlighting several controversial issues from the treatment of the death row prisoners to the dulled ambience of the death penalty, this story is told in flashback from the perspective of Paul Edgecombe, who is the head of the death row prison. The name The Green Mile comes from the green linoleum floor leading to the electric chair. Once an inmate named John Coffey arrived, the prison turned upside down. A huge man everyone feared but yet wouldn't hurt a fly. He was sentenced for a crime he didn't commit, which was the murder and rape of 2 girls. It was written in a sense of sympathy for the result of the Haitian massacre in 1804, which was a massacre carried out by black men to whites, leaving revenge. After the massacre, the whites had a bad judgment on blacks since blacks are discriminated against by whites. But besides being composed of reality and John Coffey's superpowers, the film also touches on important issues such as racism, punishment of innocent, and death. First, we look at the characters' alignment and describe their characteristics, while also discussing the main themes and how they contributed and how they are perceived by the audience. The main 2 we focus on are race and religion, which are very talked about to this day. In this film, racism is used throughout, representing how society was in the early 1900s when segregation was in the law. To give you an example of segregation at this time, African Americans weren't allowed to vote and couldn't marry or be in public with whites. Throughout the novel, racism plays a prominent role, reflecting the politics and social realities of this era. Throughout the story, African Americans are depicted as discriminated against and mistreated. The theme of racism and discrimination is evident, as many of the prisoners on death row are black, suffering from unfair treatment. As many of the other characters view John Coffey's abilities with suspicion and fear, he is a victim of prejudice and misunderstanding. There are 3 main forms of racism used throughout the Green Mile, those being institutional, internalized, and interpersonal racism. Racism is often used verbally, such as insulting, excluding, and even blasphemy. In addition, racism can also be seen in institutional policies that favor the dominant group and emphasize regulations that narrow development and justice opportunities for minority groups. For example, John Coffey's case got rejected for re-examination because it was so-called unimportant and then ignored, which later he was sentenced to death. This next clip shows John Coffey arriving at the penitentiary, in which we see many forms of racism being displayed.
Dead man! Dead man walking! Dead man walking here! Dead man! We got a dead man walking here! Dead man walking! We got a dead man walking here!
Percy, it's enough. I'm not gonna have any trouble with you, big boy. Can you talk?
Yes, sir, boss. I can talk.
Move your ass. Let's go. Come on.
Percy, they're moving the house down in the infirmary. Why don't you go see if they can use some help?
They got all the men they need.
Why don't you just go and make sure? I don't care where you go, Percy, just as long as it's not here at this very moment.
Next, I want to talk about religion. There are multiple scenes in this movie that heavily follow biblical allusions, such as the story of Jesus and the healing powers used throughout the film. The author Stephen King has mentioned that John Coffey's initials were meant to resemble Jesus Christ. This gives us an understanding of Coffey's powers and the reason behind his ability to heal others. The first biblical allusion I wanted to touch on was John Coffey's case and him being wrongly accused and executed. This falls in line with the Herod and Pilate where Jesus Christ was tried. Another biblical allusion is Paul Edgecombe's wife, Melinda Moores, had a brain tumor which John Coffey healed, and she gave him the medal of St. Christopher to put around his neck, drawing a parallel between the lives of John Coffey and St. Christopher. Christopher was a legend with enormous size and strength. Christopher is said to be carrying the burden of the world on his shoulders. For the last biblical allusion, I wanted to show a clip. In this clip, we see John Coffey's compassion and humanity expressed to those in suffering or need, in which we see a resemblance between Coffey and Christ.
I'm tired, boss. Tired of being on the road, lonely as a sparrow in the rain. I'm tired of never having me a buddy to be with, to tell me where we's going to, coming from, or why. Mostly I'm tired of people being ugly to each other. I'm tired of all the pain I feel and hear in the world every day. There's too much of it. It's like pieces of glass in my head all the time. Can you understand?
Yes, John.
In all, the film The Green Mile holds a lot of emotion throughout, giving you a great understanding of how society was shaped in the 1900s. We see and describe many forms of racism that occurred throughout the film. Then we discuss religion and biblical allusions found throughout. All are extraordinarily rich, with remarks such as John Coffey's character and his execution that suggested Jesus Christ's crucifixion. There are multiple themes, the most important being morality, justice, racism, and religion. These are all still a huge part of our society to this day, and overall this film carries a very powerful story and tackles these complex themes and represents how life in prison was during the Great Depression. Lastly, we understand this movie is about evil in this world that not even the purest of healers can fix.